most companies have core values on their wall, but they don't reflect who they are or where they're going to the truest point. Once you have the core values solidified, the next step is always to look at the vision, to be practical and reasonable.
How is success measured, right? Success measured by fulfillment? Is success measured by, possessions? How did you measure success at 25? And how did you measure success at 35? And then how do you think you're going to measure success at 45?
Success at 25 was making enough passively where I didn't have to be directly involved to be with my kids. Success now is the same. So I've achieved it to an extent, right? I gave up some of that by buying into the business because I believe in the vision of that business. I believe in the mission of that business. And again, that's on me. I know that I'm going to give up some of that success this year in order to launch a new business and launch the new baby, right? But the barometer doesn't go away. It doesn't matter if you're making 50,000 or 5 million. There's still wants, there's still desires, there's still drive. And I think it's important. I think it's important to have, even if it's not things, it's directly, time with your kids, adventures, et cetera, et cetera. I think that it's very important to have a very clear line. And it's really hard to measure time with your kids, right? How many of you guys have a calendar that shows the hours of the day that you're going to spend focused on your kids without your phone in your hand? Nobody does that, right? Maybe Elon. You never know. The reality is that we use different objects as barometers that try to move us forward. And I told this story recently. For 5 years, I had a challenge coin on my desk that has a Piper Cub on it. It's a neat little old airplane, little yellow airplanes that when you think of an airplane, it's either a Cessna or a Piper Cub or a 747. There's basically no in between. It was iconic. It's an airplane I learned to fly in. I loved them. I always wanted one. I couldn't afford it. My company was, after 5 years, we had our first profitable year. I made $31,000 and got audited by the IRS because they're like, how are you spending so much money and not making any profit? And after I had the conversation with the auditor, he's like, why do you do this? You didn't pay yourself anything. You made $31,000 and I didn't get you on anything except you didn't log your miles in your company vehicle. Why do you do this? I'm like, I do it because I love it. I do it because I believe in it. I said, did you always want to be an IRS auditor? He's like, no, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I was like, really? And you became an auditor? That little coin on my desk was a reminder of the success I wanted someday. And then one year I bought it. And then I actually ended up having to trade it for a building that we're in now, one of our buildings. And it was really ironic. Losing it, I didn't care. Once I got it, I didn't care about it anymore. And it was fine. Now I have a ornament my wife bought me. It's a Pilatus PC-12 that sits on the shelf behind me here that I see every day. And that's, the first one was a $20,000 airplane. And this is a $4.5 million airplane. The barometer has changed. It's moved, but there's still a drive for more success. And I think that's healthy. I think it's important to have things like, dude, the brakes on a PC-12 cost $35,000, right? There's no reason for me to own one of those right now, but it's good to have a dream. It's good to have a focus and look to the future, because even though I have the success I want on my personal life and my connection with my children and my wife, there's always, you got to keep driving further forward. That's why I do the consulting I do. I love consulting for equity because it allows me to look from the outside in. Is when you get so involved in your company, it becomes very challenging to look at the larger picture of things you might be missing. And if I sit on a board of a small company, I can take 25 years of business experience that I have in these really eclectic different businesses and be able to pinpoint areas. Hey, have you guys thought about blank? And it's amazing the conversations that come out of them going, oh my God, I never even considered it. I'm like, well, that's $10 million a year that we just left on the table because we didn't consider it. When I started my business at Aviator, I never had the expectation that it would be a business worth selling, right? I thought I was building something that I was deeply passionate about, that was going to change people's lives, but I never considered it as, do I go out for investment or do I sell? No, it was just, I bootstrapped the heck out of it. I didn't want debt. I didn't ever take on debt in that business until many, many years later because I wanted to build it for me. But what I've realized now as a parent and a husband is that we can build generational wealth in tiny niche businesses, because some of these businesses are getting bought up by private equity for numbers that are insane. And multipliers, 8, 10, 12, 15 time multipliers. And all of a sudden you realize you're building a legacy of money, like something you could turn around and for me, it's always 10,000 acres. If I could turn around and buy 10,000 acres with whatever the money is, that's real money. And so it's really interesting. I mean, this podcast could be sold at some point if you continue to build it to sell in a way that is focused on systems, just like every other business you guys are running. it's really powerful because not only the impact that you're making on the customers that you have, the employees that you have, but then on the lifelong impact it can create by building it to a point that it could be sold. Totally shifted my perspective and gave me and re-challenged me, so that when I do this consulting, I'm like, man, I want to help every one of these companies get sold for $100 million. Not just because I have a half of 1% or 2% of this business, but because a lot of them can be scaled at a much grander level because people aren't thinking of this bigger picture of how do we sell it. They're thinking of, oh my gosh, I have this client who has this need, and I have this appointment, and I have these meetings, and it's just, you're so in the minutia of being in the business, you can't work on the business.
Yeah, I mean, to your point earlier, it's like most businesses aren't in a position to be sold even if they wanted to, right? Because, ultimately, a lot of times there's so much tribal knowledge, or, the founder or the founding team is really providing most of the value. And so, we like right now, our business is in a position to sell, but the way we're thinking is how do we create it such that essentially this isn't the Andrew and Mike show, this is the Better Than Rich show, right? There's a reason we didn't brand it as Andrew, the Andrew Biggs and Mike Abramowitz show, and there's the reason why our company is structured the way it is. And if you build SOPs, you actually can, relieve yourself eventually when it's appropriate. So, I mean, this is really, again, right on the nose of what we love to talk about. I'm curious, with your consulting work, it sounds like, I'm not really sure exactly how it works, but what are some of the biggest problems that you like to solve specifically for in your consulting? And how does that, what are some things that you've learned from that?
The first is usually most companies have core values on their wall, but they don't reflect who they are or where they're going to the truest point. And I give an exercise because it's really easy. The best exercise I've ever learned for creating core values in a business works for your family and for yourself as well. And that's simply if you take a look at the 5 people you fired were the worst employees you've ever had, tell me their core values. And they tell you stories. Oh, this person was late. This person didn't care about other people's time. This person didn't get deliverables done. This person really was toxic, and they messed this up and they messed that up. And you start to hear these stories and you write them down, and then you reverse them. Because whatever this toxicity was that was in this person that you removed from your company, the antithesis of that is who your company needs to be. It's what your company's about. So we look at the negative. I had this conversation with my kids this week. We're doing Legato's system for core values for our family. Rich Christensen's phenomenal guy. And from me, instead of asking who we are, I ask who we aren't. And my kids come back to me. Well, we aren't cruel. We aren't mean. We aren't evil. We aren't. Okay, these are great things. I'm taking notes. Okay, we can distill all those down into, we're not bad. Okay, so that means we're good. Okay, how can we put that into a core value, right? It allows us to distill this in a way that really helps create direction. Because once you have the core values solidified, the next step is always to look at the vision, to be practical and reasonable. It's good to have a BHAG and have all these ideas. I'm going to, make $100 billion. Okay, that's fine, but let's be reasonable and let's set really clear markers on a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month, 18, 24, 5-year goals, and then just kind of helping keep them aligned with it. And trying to look for areas that they're going to be blind to because they're working so hard in their business with the annoying client, with the employee problem, with the whatever it is. We all have the same problems. It's and then sometimes it's helping